Hello.
Hi, Ashira.
How's it going?
Good. As far as I know, we're on track to make quorum, but we'll find out for sure.
I saw the note from Srini and
Ben has to leave partway
Ben.
through, so 5 of us, but with one, so there's 2 of us right now. Guess we'll see.
And the most current version of the compiled report is Ben's version that he just sent about an hour ago. Is that correct?
I think we should probably use my version just because that's what everyone else has been looking at. I think I told Ben that as we go, if he's not here, I'm happy to like copy and paste those edits in. But that will at least make it so everybody has seen, the same version, so we don't have confusion over what's sort of on board. Does that make sense? I can send it to you again or forward the email.
That makes sense.
It's in the meeting materials, I think, as well.
I've posted a link to my edit suggestions in the chat.
Thanks, Pike. It may also make sense, Mia, and let me know if you think otherwise, just to use the one that Pike has worked from then, because it also has the suggestions that he made to the original document.
I don't feel strongly about it. Again, it just Ben has his own like line by line document too. So figuring out what everybody has looked at, I think it probably makes the most sense to start with the last thing that was that's also in the meeting materials as well. I know Pikes has track changes, but there's a couple different versions floating around, I guess. I'm going to forward you what I sent to the group just so you have it, and we'll also keep the original text up as well. Okay, just a sec. Forward that you right now. So that was the one I sent out last week.
Pike, could you drop that link one more time, just so I can record it for our minutes?
And let me just do another check on where we are with quorums. So it's 2, 3, 4, 5, and it looks like we have 6, I think. So sure, let me know if you need to do anything, but I will otherwise go ahead and call this meeting to a start if you're ready.
Sure thing. Just waiting. Yeah, just now got your email, so I'll pull that one up.
Okay, that's the one that's in the meeting materials as well. Okay, I think while Ashira is getting this ready, I can call this meeting to an order. I'm just pulling up the agenda. Okay, so hi everybody, thanks for joining us. As always, it is very helpful to have EAG members turn their cameras on and stay muted, and everybody else who's not staff or EAG members, turn your cameras off. I think that'll really help the flow of the discussion and keep us all on track. So thank you. In terms of going over the agenda, we do not have meeting minutes from November 19th due to some admin crunches. We will have them available by the next meeting, and then we'll review the minutes for both of them. So apologies on that, but we'll get to it next time and make sure everyone has adequate time to review it. And then we will have an update from our tag liaisons, Emily and Matt, updates from the PUC. And then we'll spend most of the meeting just reviewing edits and trying to get our report in, reasonable enough shape to submit. As a general reminder, we have 2 meetings left, including this one. And then the last meeting before it's due on the 17th, we'll need to reserve to approve a finished document. We have public comment at the end. I think I'll defer to Ashira on when there might be good inflection points in the final report to also do public comment, because there is, quite a long time that's just a block of reviewing. So Ashira, I think whenever you want to jump in and do public comment, but in case we have someone who's planning on joining late, we can definitely do one last round of public comment at the end. And then we'll do next steps and figure out what we need to do to get into good shape for the 17th. And then we'll close out on as usual. Are there any edits to the agenda that I may have missed? Okay. Hearing none, we will skip over the meeting minutes approvals for next time, and then we will go to our update from Emily and Matt on tag business. So whichever one of you.
Thanks, Mia. I'll hand it off to Matt in a moment to cover what I missed or expand on anything. So I guess to start with Opinion Dynamics, who is working on the Clean Heat Standard, TRM, released an updated draft of that. And so that's been a large part of the TAG's work recently, and within the last TAG meeting was discussing feedback and questions for Opinion Dynamics in a timely manner based on that updated TRM draft. The TAG had convened a working group, and yeah, there were a lot of questions around assumptions, continuing assumptions. And then we also had a discussion around the translation of carbon intensity values to credit values. I think that's a statutory task of the TAG, and we kind of just started that discussion. We touched on the issue of double counting, but didn't really come up with any, I think, definitive next steps or official feedback. So I think, yeah, just noting that we started discussing that. Ben Plosker from Efficiency Vermont in the previous TAG meeting talked about measure costs and just started to talk a little bit about that from EVT's perspective. And we had a Q&A, and that led to some TAG requests to continue this work for biofuels. And so I think that's also continuing work. And continuing topics within the next couple of weeks in this week's TAG meeting will be public health and quantifying fuel price impacts. And the December 12th meeting will be the TAG's last meeting. So I think that's going to be a pretty jam-packed meeting. I'll hand it off to Matt.
Yeah, that's a good summary, Emily. Just to put a little color to it, there's a tremendous amount of work that the TAG has to do in a very short amount of time. And I'm no doubt we will produce a document. But I mean, just to think about, we're establishing a value, working with Opinion Dynamics for every measure, fuel or equipment or service that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, making sure that it makes sense, and then establishing a value for that. It is a difficult row we're hoeing right now, and perhaps with the benefit of time, but we're going to do it. I mean, it's happening.
Can I ask just to clarify? So I believe that, the TAG is supposed to remain in effect for longer than the 12th. Is your group basically taking a break until this is worked out in the legislature?
Sorry, I didn't mean like the last ever TAG meeting. I meant the last TAG meeting of the year.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, oh, okay.
Sorry, I misspoke. Dominic can probably share more, but I think like the TAG is statutorily required to meet, and then I think it's like pretty open-ended how often and how much the TAG will work on in the new year due to the legislative session and what tasks exist. So I think like it's a little bit uncertain from my perspective, but the last TAG meeting of the year before the commission's report to the legislature is this week. Feel free to jump.
Yeah, which of course is what really matters here. I mean, that's our last best chance, both for EAG and TAG, to inform the writing of that report.
Okay, that totally makes sense. Yeah, we have not actually as a group discussed, and we probably should, maybe next meeting, what our schedule should be after January 15th. Again, we're required to, exist until Act 18 is enacted, or I guess, sorry, until the Clean Heat Standard is enacted or Act 18 is somehow unwound. I think it's not super clear what we would do, but I assume there's some form that we exist in, the first part of 2025. So that will be potentially interesting to ask the TAG what the plan is to sort of work with the legislative schedule or how active to be until, again, we have more clarity on Act 18. So if you're able to sort of keep us informed about what the tag is doing, I'm also happy to reach out and sort of see what we might want to do in the next couple months as this is being worked out. So thanks. Okay, were there any other tag updates? Super helpful. Okay, any questions from the EAG? Okay, in that case, I will turn that over to Dominic for updates from the PUC.
Hello, everybody. Not a lot of updates today. We are in the trenches of getting everything ready to go to the legislature on January 15th. I did want to bring back an update from the last meeting. EAG requested that all the materials associated with CHS, which does include the EAG report, be posted in both the Dash rule and the Dash INV case, as well as on the CHS website, as well as submitted to the legislature. Apparently that is out of the ordinary, but everything about this project is in some way out of the ordinary, so the commission is happy to do all of those things. It'll be in both cases. It'll be on the CHS website. It'll be on our legislative reports website, which is in a different section of puc.vermont.gov. And then, of course, we'll be transmitting it to the legislature as well. I believe Mia will also be sending the final group approved version to the legislature independently. So it will arrive on their desks from a couple different directions. Other than that, nothing particularly new at the moment. Matt, what's up?
Mia, Dominic, if I could ask a question. So on Friday, the PUC published credit obligations, but those credit obligations were based on the early filing or the January 31st / February 28th filing, not on the extension that was given until October 31st.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the intention? Can you ask, do you know this, or if you don't know it, could you figure out, can we get it answered? Is the intention for the PUC to publish the credit obligations for those that filed after March 1st, but before the 31st of October, or are those not going to be calculated?
I don't have a definitive answer for the calculation of the new ones. That order did make very clear the pretty severe limitations of the numbers that we currently have. So defer to the language of the order on that one. Matt, I think with a lot of the other elements that are, 3/4 of the way there, it'll depend on how this report is received in the legislature. We're also moving towards the next registration deadline, and so we'll want to make sure we don't get our numbers crossed there.
Got it. Thank you.
And I'll just add with what Dominic said about submitting the report. Yeah, it's my plan. He sent me a list of all the people to submit it to, which is super helpful. There's a long list of names at the legislature with various committee staffs and stuff that we're expected under Act 18 to submit to. So my plan is to email a copy of the report. I'll CC Dominic so the PUC has it, and then I'll probably forward the whole exchange to the group so that they can also see that I submitted it. And then we'll do that just after the January 7th meeting when we've all formally approved the report. So happy to have any input if there's sort of anything else you feel like you'd like to see our report show up in. I feel like we've got our bases covered, but again, happy to do whatever the group wants to feel like we fully did our Act 18 obligations. Okay, any other questions for Dominic about PUC stuff? Okay, I'm not hearing any, so I will turn that over to Ashira to talk about what we're going to do today.
Thanks so much, Mia, and thank you so much for Mia's put in a lot of work to pull together this report and all of the different sections that we have. So we did circulate the final report, so you should see that in your inbox. A lot of people have had the chance to already go through and make some edits. We did want to address the concern about the way that it has been edited. So I wanted to give Mia a chance to talk a little bit about the way that she went through editing and compiling the report and how we're going to move forward from that.
Yeah, thanks, Ashira. So, due to some availability issues, including mine, we weren't able to meet last week. So that leaves us for our report writing group. So that leaves us, essentially 4 hours to make substantive effort edits to, get the report in good enough shape. And that was a real concern for me. Sort of looking at like what we had available on the sort of draft outline that we had sort of had with the submitted stuff. When we have gone through content sort of section by section, there's been a huge amount of edits, and that definitely concerned me that we had some pretty big holes in addition to just formatting and fixing citations. So, I kind of did my best to go through the report, make it uniform, in a place where I felt that if we made sort of no additional progress, the report would at least be internally consistent, reasonably cited and make sense. I hope and I am confident that the group can make the report significantly better and reflect group consensus. But I wanted to get a point where if we weren't going to touch other sections of the report, which I believe is very likely, it's not something that couldn't be submitted and would have a large like placeholder here. So you'll notice that I made, quite a few edits throughout, just getting rid of some uncited claims. There were definitely sections where recommendations appeared sort of in the challenges section. So just kind of smoothing it out to, I think, reflect how the report looks as a whole. And again, I definitely have heard some concerns where that's a judgment call and I may not have made the right call about what things should be edited and shouldn't. Like I said, I really just wanted to make my best effort to do it. So I think we should use what I have to make suggestions and use that as a starting point over the next 2 meetings. I think we can certainly draw back from the existing document, which Ashira will have available as a starting point if we don't agree with anything. But again, just trying to use the next 4.5 hours we have available really wisely and make sure that we're getting this over the finish line in a sort of practical way. So happy to accept any edits. I know there's already some great ones that have been made. Any questions on that? But yeah, just trying to move forward and make sure we get this done. So turn it back over to Ashira. Thanks.
Thanks. And just so that I can get a sense of how we should proceed, how many people had the chance to read over this relatively thoroughly or feel like they have a good sense? If you do, raise your hand. If you don't.
I still have some sections to go through, but trying to kind of read with intention and really instead of just like reading it really quickly, just trying to be as thorough as possible. And I just do want to give a shout out to Mia. Amazing job putting it all together. That was quite the feat. And it was really great to see it all put together. And for readability, I think we're in a pretty good spot. So thank you very much for that.
Everyone else pretty much have a chance to look over it. Pike? Yeah, Emily, I see you nodding yes.
Yeah, I've read through as much as I could, but there's still stuff that I
It's
haven't
60
read through.
pages.
Yeah, exactly. So I've done my best.
Okay.
I can review.
Oh, I should just add for clarification, anything that we like officially said was done, which I think are the memos, the commercial industrial sector and the household, the Vermonters of Color section. I didn't touch any content. The only things I did was like citations and like headers and stuff. But I really stayed away since the group looked at those in depth, just to clarify that those should not need re-review, but of course, everyone should look over and catch any typos. So just to clarify, thanks.
Okay. And Pike, I saw your hand as well.
Yeah, I was just acknowledging that I reviewed it.
Okay, great. So I think the thought for today was to start with some of the sections that we thought might be heavier, that might need a little bit more time, where there might be some disagreement, and we can talk through. So one of those big pieces was the benefits, harms, limitations of the clean heat standard. But I do want to check in with the group to see if there's any other places that have substantial discussion still needed to feel comfortable about before we would send it off to the PUC.
As I mentioned in an email I sent the other day, I think the last section, the recommendations section, needs to be entirely reworked.
Okay. So benefits and harms recommendations. Emily?
Yeah, I have two thoughts. One, can you just confirm when like we will be the date of the meeting that we'll be all officially voting on the whole report? And then I did see Pike had a lot of feedback on that implementations recommendation. And I think there's some context, maybe from Mia or Ben about how that's not, it sounds like there's maybe some clarification that could help Pike with that's not like the recommendations of the EAG report. That was like a really specific type of recommendation and implementation around a discussion we had. And that there's like recommendations elsewhere for the actual Clean Heat Standard program.
Yeah, I can speak to that real quick. So that section was written with the intent to. So Emily's right. So we have recommendations throughout the. If you read through, there's recommendations for each demographic that we've touched upon, and the implementation recommendations. I wrote that through the lens of, in statute, it says that, for example, the PUC has to will write a report once a year, about how measures have been basically equitably or inequitably implemented throughout that year for the previous year. So that was through the lens of, if implemented, how can the PUC essentially ensure that, or PUC or others ensure that equity is built into the implementation process. So slightly different than recommendations specific to each demographic, if that makes sense. So it's that was the lens in which that was approached from. And in reading that section, you'll notice, we did touched upon, the various forms of equity and how they should be essentially built into the implementation process. So I don't know if that kind of helps your understanding that section, Pike, or?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we reviewed the Climate Council's copy the first 2 and 3 weeks and chose to go with another rubric and another set of equity benchmarks that we felt was stronger. And all of a sudden, we're going back to what I feel is really fairly useless Climate Council jargon, and ignoring our own work on equity around the equity rubric that we developed.
Yeah, I mean, it is I suppose a fair point that, I was going to use the rubric that we developed as a guide to craft that section. I did feel as though many of the recommendations that were built into each demographic section specifically did kind of touch upon, much of what is in our equity rubric. I think, I guess in the way we've formed those recommendations or actually written them out, they don't specifically call out, the language that we used in the equity rubric, which I suppose they could, but I mean, at this point, that would be, quite a bit of work to go back through and edit. But yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. I also did kind of feel that, the Climate Council language is fairly succinct in, I was trying to essentially point out in that section that it's like, if the PUC is going to do a report yearly and just kind of essentially report on what has happened in the previous year, that is not true equity in a sense. We need to ensure that, there's various, outreach and the procedural, contextual, distributive equity, et cetera. That is, so that I kind of leaned on that language from the Climate Council. I don't know as though it's useless, because I think it is fairly factual in the way that if you read the Just Transitions document from the Climate Council, it's pretty spot on, in my opinion, in how they discuss just the idea of equity. And so thought I would, lean into that language just to ensure it's included somewhere in the 60-page report. I think to write a report on equity and not include kind of those tenets of the various forms of equity would be sort of a swing and a miss. So I personally think it's really works well to have it in the report. So I don't know. I mean, I would be happy to review any draft that you come up with for that section. and we'll happily you know, edit that with you if you propose some language there.
Thank you, Ben. I think, so it sounds like we have two big things that we can look at and spend the majority of our, or a good chunk of our time on today. Is there anything else that we really want to focus on today? Yeah, go ahead, Mia.
Just wanted to speak to Emily's question about, you know, timeline and what we have available. I mean, there's definitely this meeting. I think next time was when we had decided to try to approve, you know, like tentatively approve the report with any sort of edits that needed to be, you know, were approved by the group. I think we could make edits on January 7th. I think that's pretty risky and they should be like really small ones. So I'd be hopeful, but like by the end of our next week's meeting on Tuesday, we would have it either approved or like a very prescribed list of things that could be changed, and I could have that turned around by the 7th. But I think basically the end of next Tuesday is the last time where we could send back substantive changes, if I'm being clear enough. Like I think that's kind of the end of the road to have agreed on edits to be then incorporated by the 7th, if that makes sense. So happy to answer any questions, and we can do this however the group wants, but that's how I think we could sort of practically do it and definitely have a final version like ready to say yes to on the 7th.
Mhm. So of that, are there any other sections that really today we want to spend significant time going through, having significant discussion on?
And so when you say significant discussion, are we talking about you know, kind of broad swaths of rewriting? I mean, I have some suggested edits for probably all sections. I'll have more in detail for, you know, the various demographic sections beyond what I've already suggested in the past. But you're talking about like big, large scale reworks? Is that what we're, I mean, I hope there aren't many of those. That would be a heavy lift, but okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm talking about places
Yeah.
that might have tension, broad disagreeing opinions on substantive content that the EAG would have to discuss together. Okay, so I'm hearing that as a no. So let us start again at the harms, benefits. Sorry, I'm scrolling all the way back up. I am very proud of this huge document that we put together in the past few months. Just how meaty it is. Okay, so the benefits, harms, and limitations of the clean heat standard. So that is on, I believe, page 7. And I will share with you the document that I'm working from.
Can you confirm that this is the document emailed to us titled EAG Draft Final Report?
It is.
Okay.
But I will be sharing a copy that you will be able to edit directly.
Oh, great.
Okay. Again, as always, if you can make sure that you are suggesting so that we can track your changes. Okay. And so we'll start at the benefits, harms, and limitations of the clean heat standard. Let's give ourselves about 10 minutes to read through. Actually, it's pretty hefty, so we'll give ourselves about 15 minutes to read through. We'll come back at 1:15 and make any edits, any comments, think through any questions that we have for the section. Think specifically as well, is there anything big that's missing? We're going less on the nitpicky wording and more unless the wording itself has a significant change to the meaning of what's being said. We're more looking for the broad, like what's missing, what needs to be adjusted or said more prominently, something like that. So I'll give you until 1:15 and then we'll come back together.
So Ashira, I think that nitpicky stuff that you want us to ignore right now is as equally important as the bigger stuff. And if it's not going to happen now, we have to make sure that there is time set aside for it.
Definitely, Pike. If you have time. So yeah, and when I say nitpicky, I mean more like the grammatical, like punctuation, things like that, which are things that we don't have to discuss as a huge group, but things that change meaning. So if there is a comma that changes the meaning of a sentence, that's less nitpicky. That's something that we can discuss. Yeah. Does that make sense, Pike?
It does. I'm not sure I agree that we should ignore all that, but yeah, there are a lot of grammatical errors that I'm not sure are going to get fixed because they seem embedded in the body of the work. For example, legislatures shouldn't be capitalized, and there are many of things like that, etc.
Okay. Go ahead and correct those, and then maybe you can talk about just how we'll deal with them going on through the rest of the document. Does anyone else have questions? Just noting Ben's comment that unfortunately he needs to drop off for another pre-scheduled meeting, and thanks to everyone.
Thanks, Ben. I will grab what you sent to me with your edits, and I'll do my best to try to get those in line by line as best I can. Thanks.
Shira, this is Emily. Is limitations a separate section that we're not reviewing? Is that okay?
Yes, I believe we've already reviewed limitations.
Right.
But Mia, correct me if I'm wrong.
We did discuss it. There was a lot of group feedback that I tried to incorporate it. So if we have time, we might want to, but I think we should do this first and get the group sense of how much work we want to do. Thanks for clarifying.
All right, we're coming right up to 1:15. It looks like there's still some more that needs to be done, so I'll give us until maybe another 5 minutes. I also want to recognize and thank Pike. I know that you've already sent all of these edits to us and circulated them separately, and I appreciate you copying them over into this document. I know it can be a little redundant, but thank you so much for doing that. So we'll give us about 5 more minutes and then we'll come back for discussion.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the time to move all of them over. So I'm missing some and just trying to hit the bigger ones.
Thank you, Pike. Okay, let's all start coming back together. I want to thank Mia as well for going through and adding in Ben's comments. So anywhere you see Mia's name, that's one of Ben's suggestions, unless Mia otherwise points out. Let's get started and review some of the main chunks. So Pike, do you want to kick us off with the way that you've reworded this first paragraph?
I'll just read it. At its core, the Clean Heat Standard was designed to provide a mechanism to deliver thermal sector greenhouse gas emission reductions at a scale and pace sufficient to meet Global Warming Solutions Act requirements.
And do you mind just touching a little bit on why you made those edits? Was it just to be more concise, or
Yeah, for concision, for readability, primarily.
okay. And does anyone have any objection to those? Hearing none, let's go down. So someone's made a change from technically to theoretically.
That was me.
Mhm.
The potential study, that's kind of like, I just feel like the potential study was the technical, what was technically possible for the Clean Heat Standard to reach the Global Warming Solution Act goals. And I think that theoretical maybe encompasses some scenarios that potential study didn't look at, like a program achievable. So I think technically possible is a more accurate, but I'm fine if the department or others who are more familiar with the potential study don't agree with that.
Any objections? All right, hearing none, let's move forward. Pike, you added if Vermont sees significant increase in the clean energy workforce, especially weatherization workers, and you added a link to the Clean Heat Standard.
Yeah, so there was a huge caveat in that MV5 that, we need to increase FERC. So just to say, I think it's technically feasible without omitting the caveat is not quite transparent. So I think it's important to put that caveat in there.
I do think we go into depth in the limitations section, and this kind of makes it a little bit overwhelming to read. I don't feel really strongly about it, though.
Any other thoughts? Okay, and Mia, if you're not feeling very strongly, is it okay to move forward with it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I had the next edit.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just felt like we needed a little bit more detail than like having a plausible plan to meet the Global Warming Solutions Acts would be necessary. I'm open to changing these words, but I felt like equity, technically possible, financially possible, maybe not be the right word, but like economically feasible. I just felt like plausible wasn't the right word here for what we wanted a plan to be.
I think maybe we should get rid of equitable there, because I think we kind of say like, well, maybe it's not equitable, and kind of in the benefit section, at least what I was starting from was just like, okay, one benefit of the Clean Heat Standard is, yeah, you could probably, with all the caveats, meet the Global Warming Solutions Act goals, and then later on we're like, well, here's some harms that make it like less equitable. But
I see. No, that's helpful. I kind of read it. When I read it as like the EAG is saying that it's necessary to have a plausible plan to meet the Global Warming Solutions Act targets. I didn't read it in the way that you said it, so I'm fine keeping plausible.
We should be clear. I think we could say a technically and financially possible plan is important. I think, yeah, I think that one was just like, well, if we're talking about all the potential benefits, like one of the benefits is, you could do Global Warming Solutions Act goals, and then we talk a lot about the harms. But I mean, I think we should get, that is an important wording, because I don't want it to be like an endorsement. I want it to be like we're weighing the options, but
yeah. I think reading it again with the however, the potential study highlights the challenges. I think I agree with you, Mia. So I'm fine with what you suggested. I'll delete equitable. And write a technically and financially possible plan.
Alrighty, any objections to adding that? The financially and technically.
I'm seeing, sorry, I missed it in the shuffle. I think Ben wanted to just get rid of that section that we just discussed about having a plausible plan and then just adding the potential study challenges. I don't really know, he's not here. We could remove it. I don't know if we
I
want to add.
actually would recommend that too, Mia. I feel like it just reads like the however part is what we want to highlight, not that like the plan is what we want to highlight.
Okay, that might be fine. I mean, I don't know if we want to elaborate on it anymore. I think we want to keep however though, because it says is technically possible is still there in the previous one. So maybe I can add that back in because I think that was part of Ben's comments. Yeah, I don't want us to sound like we're endorsing it, just saying like they're speaking to the reason why people are trying to do this, but I think it's there as it stands.
I think this reads better. I like that.
Yeah, sure.
Alrighty. Any objections? All right. Pike, going to you on this next paragraph.
Yeah, I just tried to rewrite it for clarity and brevity.
Okay.
I don't think I've made any changes to the tone or intent of the text.
We'll give everyone a few quick seconds to read over that paragraph and see if there's any objections. All right. Mia, I see you've added the thermal sector in Vermont is not currently equitable. Pike, does that still have the same meaning that you were going for with the revise?
It has the same meaning, but I don't think it's necessary. I think we understand that we're talking about Vermont and we're talking about current situation. I think it makes it read more slowly and unnecessary.
Would you be okay with still moving forward with it regardless?
Yeah, if that's what folks want.
Okay. Any other corrections to this paragraph?
Yeah, I think there might be some duplication. I'm just trying to, maybe not. Yeah, okay, never mind. Okay, I think it's fine.
Alrighty. So let's go ahead and accept those. Oop. Shoot. Thermal sector in Vermont. Okay. And Pike, you deleted this because this is the piece that you reworded. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So then it looks like we have a comment saying, I'm a little confused about this section. It says the expansion of efficiency programs, but we talk about the development of new DDA run programs. Are we talking about the expansion of existing statewide EE programs? And this is from ER.
That's me.
Oh, makes sense.
Yep.
Emily.
Yeah, I think that when I read this, I just feel a little bit confused about what we're talking about. So I don't know, Mia, if you wrote the section, if you want to just talk me through it. I feel like I am getting confused about like you talking about the funds from the obligated party to the DDA, and it doesn't really, I feel like for me, make that connection. You talk about WAP, and then you do talk about like the third paragraph down. That's, I think, adds to my confusion where it talks about the development and implementation of statewide clean heat programs and measures by one or more DDA could also produce benefits by offering statewide coordination of programs and services. Are you talking about like new programs the DDA would run, or just like the DDA program itself in their administrative role in the market. And then, yeah,
Yeah,
so, yeah, go ahead.
just for clarity, Ben drafted, not to let myself off the
Oh,
hook,
Ben
Ben
drafted
drafted a
this.
lot of this, and so
Yeah.
I kind of polished up some stuff that he had started with. So that's,
Got
I
it.
think, maybe part of the reason it's not as coherent is we took some parts and added it. So totally acknowledge that this could be more clear. I think ultimately, and maybe we just need to say this in fewer words, like this, the clean heat standard could provide more money for efficiency work in general. And I think the means are important. Like, is it the DDA? Is it WAP? Again, I think it comes down to like, and we can find a better way to say it, more money for efficiency work. Like, I think that's the way you could do it at a broad level, which is, I think, a benefit. But again, it does get kind of in the weeds and also confusing. So happy to do whatever the group thinks is needed to just kind of make this more clear as a potential benefit. So I don't know if that helps give you context as to what's going on there.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm just wondering what you and Ashira want to do. I feel like the
Mhm.
first couple paragraphs need to be reworked a bit.
Mhm.
I feel like I just get lost in what what like you explaining that helped a bit, but I feel like it's not communicated that way. Are we like editing it and drafting up this section now?
Well, I could always take another stab at it for next time. Again, I don't know how much we'll want to do for next time. I mean, I guess like just taking the tone of the group, like, I mean, do we think just at a high level, it's like there will be more money available, especially for WAP, and that's a good thing, is kind of a valid point, and maybe we just don't talk much about the DDA? I want to respond to the group, and I'm not sure if I know what to cut.
I think that the DDA piece gets confusing for sure, especially because we know the DDA is an administrative role, but I think, Dominic, correct me if I'm wrong, but based on like the orders that are out, the RFI process ongoing, and then the RFP process, there's a lot unknown about how the DDA is going to be structured and what it looks like. And then at this moment, so I think that it's hard in that way. And then I think that like you do talk about like statewide coordination of programs and services. I think that's really important. I think noting like avoiding asymmetries in the creation of new programs is important. And I think like the WAP piece makes a lot of sense to me. And I think adding maybe a sentence of like, we've talked before just about in general, like energy efficiency programs in the state, and the expansion of existing programs. And that doesn't really get talked about in this section, but I know we talk about it in other sections. So from my perspective, I feel like maybe cutting the DDA program administration piece out and like highlighting existing programs are doing this work. There could be additional funding for all efficiency programs. The WAP piece looked great to me. So yeah, I think just streamlining those points maybe
Mia,
from my
Okay.
perspective.
Yeah.
Mia, do you want to maybe take a like we'll go through the other comments to make sure that those are kind of in line. But do you want to take a stab at reworking that section, and then we can come back to it
Sure.
maybe
I'll do my
after
best.
reading? Yeah,
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
appreciate it. So maybe we won't focus too much on the other pieces since this paragraph is going to be reworked. I do want to point out, Pike, you've been reminding us that obligated parties is lowercase, and inserting parties after obligated. Just checking with the group if that's how we want to talk about the obligated parties in the lowercase, not as a pronoun. Proper noun. Any opinions, or are we good with being more consistent about keeping obligated parties lowercase? Okay, hearing no opinions. And then just wanted to check in with Emily. Were you the one who wrote to avoid the asymmetries piece?
Yeah, I think that like doesn't need to be there if you take out the DDA piece, because I think
Mhm,
this sentence probably just needs to be taken out that I just highlighted. Because to
mhm.
me that says like the DDA will be developing new clean heat programs, and I don't think that we know that based on what's out for the DDA. And again, anyone can let me know if I'm wrong about that. But I don't think we need that unless we're actually saying that the DDA should be developing new programs.
Gotcha. All right,
So-
let us give Mia a little bit of time to work on that. In the meantime, let's go down to the direct benefits for households.
Can I ask, Ashira, before we do that, just a
Mhm.
point that Ben raised, about obligated parties and like what they might do or might not do. I don't know if that is a benefit and or harm, about like you're doing something in the marketplace. I think Matt's section speaks to it. I didn't know if we wanted to, I mean, I think we should either elevate it or remove it because it's just kind of there without, like, in the middle of another section without really doing anything. So I think the group should decide if we should expound upon it in a different section or just like totally get rid of it, because I think it's confusing here as its own separate problem or benefit, depending on how that works out. So I don't know if the group has any thoughts about what to do with that section on obligated parties that Ben sort of alluded to there.
Sorry, Mia. Can you just I'm a little lost. Can you like
Sure.
or
It's
can
in the middle
Ashira
of the
highlight
section.
it?
Yeah, it was in the middle of
Okay.
the section. I was trying to like clean up, and I was like, oh, I don't know if we delete it. So sorry, I'm not trying to derail this. It says, basically it's the second paragraph that's if a credit market is robust and functions as intended. It's talking about encouraging obligated parties to diversify their businesses. Conversely, obligated parties unable to diversify in the marketplace could go out of business. And again, that just seems like also confusing because it's not really about that section. And again,
Yeah.
I think it needs to either go or something else needs to be done with it.
I agree with that. So Ben's recommendation was just to take it out.
No, Ben wanted to elaborate on it.
Hmm.
But I don't know that he would be opposed to taking it out necessarily. We could ask him next time. Matt, I don't know if you're available. I know you talked about this a little bit in your section. So that is in the report, but
Wait,
like I said, I don't know about right here.
yeah, I'm trying to, that's not what I wrote.
No, I'm saying we talked about obligated party challenges in there, and then this kind of snippet has been added in a different section. So my vote is to either create another benefits or harm section, or just like get rid of it because I don't think it belongs in the middle of this discussion about revenue.
Yeah, I would agree with you, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, like get rid of it or do something else with it.
Well, it's in the other part where it's talking about the potential downsides under obligated parties, right?
It's under in the section on obligated parties, challenges and recommendations. It is not in our main body of responses about harms and benefits. Like at this section we're looking at right now. There's a lot of harms and benefits
Yeah,
that
I wouldn't write go out of business. I think you could soften that, say obligated parties unable to diversify the marketplace will find, I could wordsmith that to say something slightly different, but I think it would be more acceptable in that spot.
Right, but just in terms of if it belongs there at all, like I'm happy to wordsmith, or I just think it's a weird place for it, or like so it either doesn't belong or just
I agree.
gone.
Take it out.
Okay, if we're okay taking it out, that's fine. And you can always revisit the obligated party section and see if we've been sort of clear enough about the market impacts there.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sorry to derail that. I just want to be sure what we could delete. So kind of the whole paragraph I think can go, but I'll work on that while we keep going. Thanks everybody.
Yeah. Let's see, where were we? So go ahead. So going down to direct benefits for the households. Let's see. Ben added, okay, so Vermont households with installed clean heat measures, but not clean heat eligible delivered fuels to the end of the sentence. Do we have any thoughts on that? Keep it, get rid of it, not sure quite what it means. And I just went ahead and got rid of the repetition in households and the double period. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I like what Ben added. I think that if we're talking about increasing the pace of installed measures, maybe that's where, like up above, we had a Pike added in a sentence about the limits of workforce. I think that we need to note that. I don't know if it's down below, but I think that if we do talk about like this could increase the pace of installed measures, I know that for all sorts of different types of weatherization projects around the state, we're almost at, if we're not already at, our limit for capacity. So I would just recommend adding a sentence somewhere noting that. But I like Ben's addition.
I'm not seeing that anywhere. Do you mind just going ahead and drafting that
Sure.
sentence? And Pike, I see that you added air. So you corrected this to air and ground source heat pumps instead of air, ground source, and other heat pumps.
Right.
And that was just for conciseness.
Yeah, if there's a third type of heat pump I'm not familiar with, well, please educate me, but yeah, otherwise just for conciseness.
Any thoughts on that? Are there other types of heat pumps that we're missing that we want to be able to be sure to include? Dominic, I see you unmuted.
There are other types of heat pumps, but probably not ones that would be used in residential applications in Vermont.
Can we just say heat pumps? Is there a reason why we got more elaborate? I don't feel strongly. Whatever.
All right.
Yeah.
So everybody good with just going with heat pumps? Sounds good. Emily, are you finished working on that, or do you need more time?
I just did it for a minute, so I'm fine with changing it, but I gave a first go at it.
That's great. So it says, although increasing the pace of installed clean heat measures will be limited to workforce constraints and will only be able to incrementally installed based on workforce development. Does that work for everyone? Also, does the placement work with everyone? Not hearing any objections.
Well, if we're talking about benefits, I'm not sure this is the best place for it, but don't have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Yeah, I hear
thoughts?
that. I just think that we can't say like a benefit is the pace is going to increase if we don't acknowledge the reality that the pace won't increase without significant workforce capacity expansion.
Sure.
All right. Let's go ahead and accept that. Oh, and it looks like Ben also added, however, in certain areas of the state, such as those served by relatively lower cost natural gas or electric utilities with higher rates, operating and maintenance costs of heat pumps will be higher than fossil fuel alternatives. care is necessary to ensure that costs of energy do not increase due to the clean heat standard. Any thoughts or objections on that?
Again, it's true, but I'm not sure that's the best spot for it. But I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Do we have any do we have any I need just 1 minute to formulate a thought, sorry.
No worries. So I guess I'm hearing the main thing is this noted somewhere else? Is it in the harms, and do we need it in the benefits if it's not necessarily pointing to a benefit, it's kind of just augmenting a benefit?
Yeah, I think it's fine, like reflecting on a benefit. I think portraying an aspect of the situation.
So then we're feeling okay with adding it. Pike, I heard you say you don't feel strongly, but
No, I'm fine with adding it. I think yeah, it's probably important to say. You know, we were told explicitly that when we installed our heat pump, our fuel prices would go up because we use natural gas.
All right, so we'll go ahead and add that one. Mia, are you about ready for us to come back, or still need some time?
Yeah, I think so. I almost want to like accept the changes because there's so much going on there and make sure the group, yeah, it's kind of hard to read at this point.
Well, let's go through it as it is, and then
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really messy.
All right, let's give everyone a few minutes. So, or I can just read it out loud. So in theory, the creation of a market for new clean heat credits from obligated parties could enable the sources of revenue to fund the installation and delivery of clean heat measures aimed at achieving global greenhouse gas emission reduction targets in Vermont's thermal sector. The purchase of clean heat credits by obligated parties from programs installing clean heat measures in homes could create new long-term funding streams for these programs. This includes existing programs and potential new programs developed by the DDAs. To avoid asymmetries and inefficiencies in the clean heat standard market, the creation of new statewide programs by the DDA should avoid being duplicative of existing programs within the state. And then we go into the paragraph that we had at the end. Additional revenue would particularly benefit programs such as WAP, administered by the Office of Economic Opportunity, which serve the most energy burdened low-income Vermonters. And then it goes on. So Pike, I see you changed that to avoid duplicating. I'm gonna assume that that's for conciseness and brevity.
Yeah, so anytime there's a to be verb, such as being or been or to be, it probably means you could write it more concisely.
Active voice. All right, do you have any thoughts on the revisions to this paragraph?
I think this is a lot more clear. I think that we do just need a sentence like stating the expansion of existing programs. Like we have the purchase of clean heat credits by obligated parties from programs installing clean heat measures in homes could create new long-term funding streams for these programs. This includes programs and potential new programs developed by DDAs. I think that there needs to be I think that we could say could create new long-term funding streams for existing programs and potential new programs developed by the DDA. this would allow for the expansion of existing programs to complete additional incremental projects.
How does
Not
everyone
sure
feel
how-
about that? Hearing nothing, feeling good?
This would, do
Go ahead,
we,
Pike.
yeah, so I don't understand the expansion would, the expansion of additional incremental projects. Yeah, I mean, I guess if that's what it would do, that's what it would do. This would allow for the expansion of existing programs to complete additional projects.
Yeah, I think that like this, we were missing a clarifying sentence from my perspective about if we're talking about the expansion of efficiency programs, we're talking about existing programs being able to do additional incremental energy efficiency projects to what is already being done, and that's what that new funding will allow. And so
Does this edit that I'm about to make the same sense?
So
I think
Pike just
that
got,
like, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ashira.
no, I was just gonna say, Pike just got rid of the expansion, so.
I think we need to state, since the title of this is the expansion of efficiency programs, we need to make the connection between the expansion of efficiency programs allows for the completion of additional incremental projects. So I would recommend this would allow for the expansion of existing programs to complete additional incremental projects. It makes that connection.
Should we just call it more funding or additional funding for efficiency programs? I didn't mean it to be voted in that way.
I think it is expansion of efficiency programs. I think it's just we needed that connection between, from my perspective, there's additional funding that leads to expansion of programs, and the expansion of programs means programs are completing additional and incremental projects to like the baseline, what's the business as usual, what's being completed. But fine if that reads, if everyone thinks that reads.
Yeah, I just think it sounds a little strange to have an expansion of existing programs. I mean, if you expand existing programs, you're creating new programs. I don't know. I'm fine with it. Ignore me.
So we'll go ahead and accept all of these. Let's see. If you can just take one final look over it to make sure that it still looks good.
So when you ask that, I'm hoping and assuming that there will be a time for us to review this after.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. When I say that, I just mean that
For
things
now.
like this, don't go through and maybe here. What happened here? Described in the draft rule. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's meant to be the same paragraph, and the editing wouldn't let me. This was a Ben's suggestion, and I don't think it went in cleanly because too much editing.
No worries. Is this just
I think it's
to...
like a quote that needs to be like connected to the one before. Like it's draft rule, comma, quotation marks, if the measure is, and I can make sure that the citation.
Okay.
And I think Ben felt like this needed to be cleaned up, but yeah.
Okay, so do we have any thoughts on this? So he's suggesting removing under this determination, and then he has this part where it's kind of like generating a new revenue source.
What icon are you? Oh, I see you. Okay, so if I push your icon, I can get to where you are?
Yes, you can.
All right.
It's
Additional
just a picture
revenue
of my
with
face.
Okay.
Emily, do you want to talk to your comment?
Yeah, I don't think I might just resolve it. I'm not really sure if there's anything we can do. I feel like we have words like in practice, this means. I just feel like we really don't have a clear idea about, yeah, how this will play out. But I understand that this is all like in theory, this is,
Yeah.
I think maybe I was like looking for maybe we add a sentence like if I'm not really sure. So I'll just resolve it.
Does anyone want to pick up on Emily's thoughts? Like that kind of, we don't know how this is going to play out. So how do we signal that more than we already have in that last paragraph?
We could cite to the draft potential study draft. If I might be losing the potential study that basically says, hey, it's going to be really hard to get low income credits as a support for that. I mean, I agree. It's super tentative. I do personally think that WAP credits are going to be in demand, and it's one of the potential bright spots. But yeah, it's totally hypothetical at this point. So we could try to cite it like saying in a footnote, like, hey, the draft rule or the draft, sorry, not draft rule, the potential study sort of nods to this or not. Happy to try to resolve that.
Yeah, that works for me. If there's time to do that.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll just put a comment and that I will go back in and add a citation. It doesn't really work in Google Docs, so I'll put a comment.
Thanks, Mia. And this last piece. So Mia, are you in this last piece, were you writing as yourself or as Ben about the credits being collected by OEO that this has been covered in another section?
Yeah, that was my comment and kind of reviewing what we already have. I think we say it in the first paragraph, like people are going to be buying these credits and giving programs money. I think it's redundant, especially based on what we've cleaned up in here.
So you're suggesting just getting rid of that and getting rid of the sentence before?
Yeah, so Ben suggested getting rid of the under this determination before, and then adding the section in after, I think. I think this got muddled, but that's what I think happened.
Okay. Would we have any objections just to getting rid of those last two sentences? I'm not hearing any, so I'm gonna go ahead and make that, get rid of that. Okay. So it looks like Ben suggested instead of should, it saying that it is expected to give them a higher value in the clean heat standard marketplace. Any objections to that?
That may have even been mine. I don't know. I think I was trying to speak to Emily's thing about how certain we are. I'm not sure if it was Ben or me at this point. I'd have to go back in the notes. So apologies if it was me.
Becoming one super person. All right. So any objections to that? All right. in practice, WAP might instead of will. Any objections to that? And I see there's 2 deleting of spaces, so we'll just get rid of those. Might instead of will. Okay. And then adding, okay, so we're into the next section about the direct benefits to households. Ben suggested so direct benefits to Vermont households with installed clean heat measures, but not clean heat eligible delivered fuel measures. We talked about this a little bit before, but is everyone okay with that?
Maybe we put it in a footnote to clarify. It feels kind of abrupt, but I don't think fundamentally wrong. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
I don't think it's needed.
Yeah. How, Pike, how would you feel about putting it in a footnote?
I don't think that's needed either, but
What about the rest of the group?
I think it's fine in the document, but I'm fine if you wanted to add it to a footnote.
I don't think those first 3 sentences are needed.
Oh yeah, it does say installed measures twice, so it says measures installed in home to Vermont households with installed clean heat measures. We should do something with that.
And Pike, you're saying that you don't think the first 3 sentences are needed, so would that be this whole from here to here?
Well, no, I would say when the actual benefits, we don't get to the actual benefits until we start talking about reducing fossil fuel use and heating costs. All this is preamble that's already been covered elsewhere in the document.
How do we all feel about that, of just starting here? In many households, this would, okay, no, we can't start there.
Direct benefits include decrease in both heating fuel and fossil fuel use.
How would you feel about that?
Sorry, where there's a highlight, where are you suggesting we start the sentence, the first sentence with?
So it'd be here, where my cursor is. So Pike was suggesting saying the direct benefits would include a decrease both for fossil fuel use and heating costs, and then just continuing from there.
I'm fine with that, but if we do that, I would say direct benefits for households installing clean heat measures would be.
How do we feel?
That
How
sounds
does the
good.
rest of the group feel? Okay. So we're saying direct benefits for households installing clean heat measures include decrease, or do you want decreases?
Decreased, I guess, with a D.
Fossil fuel use and heating costs. Okay. So then moving down, we have changing social benefits to societal benefits. Does anyone have any objections to that?
I think those are 2 different things, societal and social benefits, but I think that we are talking about societal benefits, so I'm fine with that.
Any objections? All right. So we have significant economic environmental benefits could occur as a result of a measure, okay, so it'd be a result of measures installed pursuant to heat standard, to the clean heat standard being implemented in Vermont. How do you feel about that?
Is it installed or implemented? Just because it's Ben's suggestion, but yeah, I mean, are we saying it's only installed measures here? Are we saying all the measures implemented together, installed or not installed? We should certainly be clear either way.
Any thoughts? Do you have a way that you're leaning, Mia? Do you?
I would just say implemented, but and not talk about installed measures specifically, just again based on the draft potential study that suggests net cost upside, but yeah.
And then we have implemented again here.
Yeah, I think that's just the confusing edit things. We'll just, I guess that the second one being deleted, or maybe get rid of being implemented in Vermont and do the clean heat standard. Yeah, it is so tricky when like sentences fall apart because we move stuff around.
Okay, how would we feel about that if we said a result of measures implemented pursuant to the clean heat standard, period?
Reads better to me.
All right, any objections? Okay. And then we go down, the NV5 potential study suggests that despite the significant overall cost of the programs to Vermonters, the clean heat standard would be expected to generate approximately, instead of at least, 1.03 billion net societal benefits by 2029. How do you feel about, or 2049? How do we feel about that? The part that I have highlighted. No objections? All right. And then most of the measured societal benefits accrue from the value placed on greenhouse gas emissions reductions globally using the societal cost of carbon adopted by the Vermont Climate Council. How do we feel about adding that?
Is that true? I mean, I totally trust Ben, but does anyone know about the potential study, whether that sort of $1.03 billion is how much it's tied to Vermont action versus, global action? I don't fully understand that document, so.
Yeah, I haven't reviewed the NV5 potential study in a while now, so I can't really speak to anything it says. So I don't know how accurate any of these are.
I added the thing about the net benefits, just putting the dollar amount out there. So I feel reasonably okay about that. I don't know about the second one. Again, Ben works for the department and should totally know this. I was just surprised to see it, but like he should know,
Maybe we can just flag this for Ben, but I agree. I trust Ben to hold the knowledge on this. But yeah, maybe we can just have him ask for him to look this over, even though he added it.
Or just to clarify, like, does that imply that like it's not at all related to what Vermont is doing individually or partially or something else? So let's try to get some clarity, and I'll incorporate kind of what he suggests as to making that clear. But I think we've agreed that if it is correct, we're fine with it. Okay. I will clarify with him.
And then Ben's also suggesting locally the installation of clean heat measures will likely, with the exception of advanced wood heating systems,
Yeah, there are two different edits by two different individuals there, so it's
Ooh,
a
okay,
confusing mess
fun.
right now.
Yeah.
No worries at all. Okay,
I
so
included, with the exception of advanced wood heating systems, adopting clean heat measures will help reduce air pollution generally and improve air indoor quality in many Vermont homes.
okay.
We've heard that advanced wood heating systems will increase pollution, so I want to put that exception in there. I don't know where the installation of clean heat measures is supposed to go, because that was not my edit.
Mhm.
Those
Um,
vents, maybe we could split out the whole like air pollution measures in general and then indoor air quality and keep those as separate things for the group to interrogate. I think that might help us figure out what's going on in this sentence. Does that sound okay to at least keep those like air pollution in general and indoor air quality as like separate things to talk about? Does that help?
It would help me if I had actual text to look at, but otherwise, it doesn't matter to me if it's a single sentence or two sentences.
so what if we said something like, okay, first, are we okay with if we found a way to incorporate this with the exception of wood heating systems in another area, would we be okay with the locally the installation of clean heat measures will likely
That
well
all seems redundant. We're talking about installing clean heat measures. I think we
Yeah,
can do this.
I don't know about installed either. So I think I found a study when I was just talking about like what's going on with this, that basically if the state creates, climate goals, especially related to emissions reductions, like you do see statewide impacts on cleaner air, which has all these economic benefits. And then I think separately improving indoor air quality in general also has huge, health benefits and stuff. So I don't know about locally just because I mean, do you mean hyper locally or do you mean like as a statewide level? And, I think the research suggested at least at the statewide level, but I haven't seen anything that says like your neighborhood specifically. I guess I would say I think the advanced wood heating systems maybe requires some clarification as to like what it's displacing. Like if you're with something that's like way worse, like a leaky wood heat stove, like that could potentially be way worse than an efficient pellet stove that's operating correctly. And maybe we just need, depending on what the household is transitioning from.
That's kind of what I was leaning towards too. Like, I agree that there needs to be some note about advanced wood heating systems and the health concerns. And that has been well heard, I think, in the clean heat standard proceedings so far. But I I think you're right that there needs to be like the idea of advanced wood heating systems as a clean heat measure is that oftentimes, more often than not, I think the majority of the time, those heating systems are replacing incredibly inefficient heating systems and therefore increasing like the baseline indoor air quality health issues as well as the pollution aspect. So, but mainly the particulate matter. So I think, I don't know if there needs to be a sentence in there that notes that, but
so taking the two things apart first, I feel like I'm hearing we're okay with deleting the locally the first sentence that we had. Is that right? Okay, so we go there, and then the next thing is, so if we started with adopting the clean heat measures and then maybe took this
What about separating that out and adding back in up on top the suggestion about emissions reductions, like we're talking about a statewide level? So that's the thing that's currently the third paragraph, or I think I moved it based on Ben's suggestions, but it's that paragraph about emissions reduction. So again, bifurcating it maybe into two paragraphs, but saying basically, I could make a suggestion about like what I think that should look like. And then maybe we can just clean it up. Because I think it's a good point, Pike, that needs more elaboration, but so much that I think we just need a different paragraph about like what that means. Oh, wow, that looks real rough.
All right, we'll give you a little time to do that then, Mia. Um, okay. Let's actually move into the harms, and then we'll come back to this last paragraph. So for the cost, so the greatest potential harm of the clean heat standard will come from its impact on fuel prices for Vermonters, getting rid of this extra space, particularly for those who are non-participants, meaning they don't install clean heat measures. How do we feel about that?
Not sure it's true.
Are we-
Elaborate. Pike, can you elaborate?
Yeah, so I don't know why fuel prices will be of a greater impact for those folks who don't install clean heat measures. We heard earlier that, you know, if I install a heat pump in Burlington, my fuel prices are going to go up. So I don't think this is necessarily true.
How does everyone else feel about that?
I think we can add in like, oh, go ahead, Matt.
Well, just the reality is this a clean heat measure or service, not a fuel? The clean heat measure service that has multiple years of use can reduce the amount of energy consumed, but doesn't necessarily increase the cost. To assert that is to assert that we understand what the cost of energy will be in the future. And if you use 20% less or 30% less oil heat or propane or natural gas because you installed an electric cold-climate heat pump, it assumes that you will use less of that fossil fuel, but we have no way to know that what the cost of the fossil fuel will be in future years, or even the cost of electricity, although we have better assumptions. For all we know, the prices go either way. So I think we can say authoritatively that it's more installing equipment or service, you are reducing the amount of energy, amount of fossil fuel consumed. But we can't, it's difficult to make assertions that if you're still using fossil fuel, that you will save money, because you'll be spending more money on electricity, and we don't know what the underlying cost of that fossil fuel that you still use will be.
And while I don't know, I assume that renewable fuels are more expensive than fossil fuels.
I think that we do go into, like, in this paragraph, the second paragraph, like it says the EAG has received no official estimate on the likely cost of the program, nor do we have any prediction about program costs and home impacts to fuel, and has created a significant barrier in the EAG's ability to assess the impact of the clean heat standard. And then we talk about how this concern comes from a really large number of public comments that we've heard. So I wonder if this first sentence we can, like, instead of saying like the greatest potential harm, maybe we can just say, like, I'm wondering if maybe we can say like the most common concern around harms that the Equity Advisory Group has heard from the public is related to costs. And then we just have like that sentence about low and moderate income Vermonters tend to spend a higher percentage of their incomes on heating. So I feel like we're not stating that the greatest harm is that it's the cost. It's the most common concern we've heard, and therefore it's a priority concern for us.
How do you feel about that? And then Emily, you were suggesting getting rid of this entirely, this second piece.
Yeah, maybe if that addresses Matt and Pike's concerns that we're stating something that we don't know.
Yeah, that works for me.
I saw a thumbs up from Matt. Or at least that's what I think I saw. So please let me know if not. Okay. I do want to note that it looks like John Mandeville may have dropped, but we do have a phone number. Is the person calling from 517-331-1066? Is this John Mandeville? Okay, not hearing anything. So if John has dropped, we are no longer at quorum. So maybe.
Excuse me, I'm
Oh.
John McCormick, who just read my phone number.
Okay,
331.
John McCormick. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, John McCormick. We were looking for John Mandeville, who's one of the additional EAG members. So what I might suggest doing is taking a quick break to go for public comment. And then maybe if Mia and or Dominic can reach out to John Mandeville and see if we can get him back on the line. So in the meantime, we'll go ahead and go to public comment. So if anyone has any comments, feel free to come off of mute. What we normally do is we give each person about 2 minutes to speak, and then if we have time, we'll come back to you. So feel free to go ahead and come off mute and speak into the room.
Well, I'm John McCormick.
Hi, John.
Yes, I'm reading, and I'm not sure it's the appropriate document to be commenting on, but in recommendations regarding a household that puts a secondary heating system, a heat pump, and LIHEAP, if the household is a client of LIHEAP, they should be available to cover 2 heating sources, which is not the case in the federal LIHEAP. Has any effort been made to sort of encourage that the federal LIHEAP might consider allowing this family to also get benefits from LIHEAP for their electric costs?
John, do you mind pointing us to where you are in the document? There's a page number or something that I can search.
See the document that I'm working off is page 31, and I pulled it off the chat. So you all, well,
Yeah.
all I can say is it's page 31. But the point being, there was discussion about how to treat LIHEAP's client who now puts in a heat pump. Do they also get benefits for the cost of their electricity? And the answer is no. So I'm wondering how you can say, well, they should be able to utilize LIHEAP benefits for also the electric. That's not the case, and I don't know if EAG or PUC or even the legislature can change that federal limitation that it can only be used on one fuel. So what you're going to have, I think, is going to be heat pumps installed but never used.
John, if you go to the section on recommendations under low-income households, again, I'm not sure which version you're looking at, but it's under recommendations in the section on low-income households, and there's a recommendation that says increase fuel flexibility for LIHEAP recipients. I think that's something I'd encourage you to take a look at, and if you don't think we've sort of adequately covered that, we will be doing further edits. next meeting, or you could come up with a suggestion by the end of this meeting when we take public comment again. And I'd encourage you to elaborate. And I think we did cover it, but, you know, would welcome any feedback if you think there's more we could do there. Thanks.
Well, it was covered, but it's just not realistic that the state should advocate for using dual fuels. I mean, that's only a recommendation, but it's so far out in the left field. Well, it's never going to be implemented. Because, again, I don't know who would pick up that charge to inform federal LIHEAP that this change should be made.
Any other thoughts from the EAG?
But I tell you what, I will wait until the next meeting when it's an appropriate discussion on LIHEAP.
Thanks, Sean thanks, Sean. And one of the things I think that we did here is if you do have specific language that that the EAG can work with, that's sometimes the easiest way to wrap our minds around how to incorporate it into the report.
Good. I will try that then. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other public comment? Feel free to come off mute and speak into the room. Okay, not hearing any other public comment. So I will turn to Dominic. It seems like we still haven't had any response from John. How would we move forward, not being that we don't have quorum anymore?
In a similar way to our subgroups that were able to discuss but not able to make decisions, I think at this point it would probably be most productive to continue the conversation that we're having. We just won't be able to make the collaborative edits or move towards a final approval here. So we can continue the conversation, continue to make the notes, but we won't be able to approve those.
Maybe what I'll do as well is just go ahead and save a copy of this. Yeah, just make a copy. And then would we be able to continue to work on like the edits, like the suggestions and things like that in this?
I think we could work on them as long as we don't approve them.
Right.
Okay.
Let's take a step back as to just sort of what's reasonably possible. So I think for a starter, I have to kind of do this in Word because it does not work if you copy and paste, but my plan is for everything we have actually approved textually to faithfully transcribe that into a Word copy and sort of circulate a clean copy again ahead of the December 17th meeting, you know, faithfully keeping everything we've approved. I think we can sort of decide how to sort of move along as a group. I can take what Pike and what Ben have suggested. Sometimes they kind of disagree if it's like an edit to the same section that's not like meaningfully at odds, but just different. I think what I could do is sort of try to, when I do this sort of updated copy for next Tuesday's meeting, try to take a stab at incorporating language changes proposed by Ben, Pike, anyone else, and sort of produce a clean copy that I think is closer. And then we can take the remaining half hour with any sort of high level things that we think are thematically important. And I can also, again, take another stab at getting us closer in the 17th. Does that seem like something that would work? Again, Dominic, clean with open meeting law and just the group's inclination to see this completed. So proposal, let me know what you all think about if that's an appropriate way to proceed.
My only suggestion would be rather than submit it as a Word document, just keep it as a Google Doc.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to stop working at Google at some point. Like, I need to fix citations and formatting. I could do that after December 17th, but at some point it has to get back into Word for this to like functionally work. So we should do that when the group feels is the best time for that.
And Pike, your suggestion to keep it as a Google Doc, can you help us think through?
Because when we are working together, such as we are now, we will be using the Google Docs. So when I am providing other members my edits, I do so in a Google Doc so that folks can respond to it, edit, make other additional edits, etc. That can't be done in a Word format.
And I don't know that it should be done. I don't want us to get into open meeting law where we are editing a document. My understanding that the okay thing to do is to submit a copy for incorporation, but back and forth collaborative edits get us into weird territory. Again, I defer to Dominic, but I know it's laborious, but trying to get us an okay place to do that.
Yeah, Dominic, did you want to?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
I was also emailing John, so I was in and out attention wise. I agree with the concern about Google Doc, Pike. I absolutely hear your frustration, but Secretary of State and the decision the commission made a while ago steers us away towards docs when we're not all together. Mia, do you feel it's productive to continue to move through suggestions and not into incorporation? I mean, looking at the document, I believe we still have some more. Do we have some more fresh suggestions to do? Apologies.
Yeah, we're only on page 10 of a 60-page document.
Some of this has been approved by the group. There is some stuff that we've kind of mined through. Yeah, I mean, that's why I was kind of saying I think the best way forward is for me to take what we've got, come up with a draft and kind of reset and say, okay, we've done another iteration. What's the most important stuff for us to take care of in the meeting on the 17th? And if we could get sort of feedback on thoughts, I can again take another stab at getting the group's direction on the things we think are most important and making that last meeting count. Can someone mute if you are getting some background noise? Thanks. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'd appreciate hearing the groups. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Pike, but I just don't know about, I want us to keep staying as final as possible with the content so we're all fully clear on December 17th what's changing and what's not changing when we kind of give ourselves the green light. Do we have any sort of, I think I'm hearing from what was happening on the implementation recommendations that there sort of is substantial questions about that. I think on the implementation recommendations, I think we could make it more clear that there are important recommendations throughout that we think that the state should do to support existing programs. And then we have a specific set of recommendations that's definitely for implementing, how to implement the structure of this equitably, aside from all the sort of structural things the state needs to do. So that would be one thing that I think could help clear up like what this part is for. But it seems like there's a lot of disagreement on like what this should serve. So that's where I suggest we go. Yeah, Emily?
I think that I'm not sure if the executive summary is the right spot, but I think that like we do need somewhere in the beginning and then also in the beginning of the implementation recommendations to state that this is how, just like you were saying, Mia, like this is how recommendations have been provided in this report. It's in each section. So if you're looking for recommendations for like a specific topic, go to that topic in the report. So I think there needs to be something in the beginning of the document and then at the start of that implementation recommendations piece. And then maybe like we need to add a sentence before we get into like ongoing equity review to say the implementation recommendations are recommendations specific to implementation versus like the clean heat standard as a whole. And those recommendations can be found here. So that would be my recommendation. I think that the implementation recommendations at the end and the way that it's structured is really great and I like it. And reflects the conversation I think that the group had on this topic. But I do agree that we need to clarify where you can find the regular recommendations for the program.
I think those recommendations scattered throughout the document should be collated in a final section so that people don't have to read throughout the document to find them. Just a bullet point list of recommendations.
Do those recommendations make sense devoid of context? I think some of them are kind of hard to understand unless you read the surrounding paragraph. I don't know how to create one that is readable in a short period of time.
Would it make sense to have some type of linking, like a table of content just for the recommendations where things are linked and you can look at it quickly?
I could try to create one. I don't know about literally linking it because I do feel like this is going to get real weird real fast. I could try to create some sort of table that like speaks to what section they're in, like what group we thought they would impact and where that is. I don't know if that's an appendix or if it's up front. What do people think?
I think that mixed with those, the introduction paragraph, including like where to find recommendations, would be super helpful.
Okay, I'll do what I can. It's yeah, I think it's just gonna have to be maybe a disclaimer about like there's additional context into like what this means because some of it's just like coordination stuff, which makes sense if we described why, but it's not like actionable in isolation without talking about why. But I think maybe if I say it's in the low income section and we talked, you know, here. I'll do my best. I don't know if I can do physical linkages just because with a table of contents, Word sometimes acts up, but do what I can on that. Okay. Okay. So that speaks, and Trini, I should also mention, had sort of the same comment that he wanted to see recommendations articulated. So I think we're hearing that from the group and hopefully I can kind of clean it up to get where we need to go.
Thanks, Mia. So just retesting where we are. So right now, are we walking through the implementation recommendations and how anything that we'd like to, just our overall feeling on it, or where were you headed, Mia?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should just center, you know, what's the most concerning thing that if we got nothing else done, you'd want to see me take a stab at before next time. I mean, I just think we're going to be extremely limited in about like 3 hours-ish next time. So what's stopping EAG members from feeling like really good about voting to accept it as is?
Could you confirm that like I had recommended for implementation recommendations to add like a couple sentences or even a sentence describing what that is and where you can find the regular recommendations? Is that something that we all agree would be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was planning on doing, but just
Great.
good to super clarify. And again, I'll propose some language. If the group doesn't like it, we can make sure this is an attention item that, you know, we cover off the top to make sure that kind of gets at what we were talking about.
And Emily, I've added that into the action items for today's meeting.
Thank you.
So then again, the ask for Mia is, what other big things are there that might prevent us from passing this report, and things that we should really, take a look at now, so that we can revisit them next meeting and be in a good shape to be able to submit this.
Well, again, for me, it's the implementation piece, and I'll write something alternative up.
That would be great, Pike. Do you want to walk us through a little bit what that might entail? I know that you have already at the beginning, but I think now would be a good time for just collaborative discussion, so that if other people have ideas as well about how to change this, we can you can implement that into your writing, and we'll be in a better place next meeting.
So let me just take a sentence in that section at random. An equitable CHS outcome must take into context the most vulnerable communities in the state. It is important to recognize, for example, that people of color, mobile home communities, low-income communities are most vulnerable to any increase in energy costs and already experience some of the highest energy burdens in the state. So this is a kind of a very high-level recommendation, and I think more clear, more concrete, more actionable recommendations are needed instead of this kind of high-level language. The commission must be clear and transparent in its equity assessment. So how are we asking the PUC to be clear and transparent? I think we need to go further if we're making these recommendations. Right now, I think it's just a lot of fluff. In practice, the commission must first recognize principles of distributive equity by identifying uneven distribution, resources, disparities, and living conditions. Isn't that almost what inequality means? That things aren't equal, distributed equally? I don't know. It's just, the whole thing is irksome to me.
So I don't necessarily disagree, but again, just in the time we have left, like, if you're thinking about big picture changes, like the commission should do like very specific thing, for instance, I think it's just important to keep in mind, like, what can we reasonably have the group approve and review, or review and approve, like in that next meeting, basically. So I guess I would say maybe like really big specific directives are going to be hard to maybe get us, all the way comfortable with and ready to vote.
In any document, the first section, and especially the last section, the conclusion, is really the most important piece. That's where you want to put your most important information, the heart and the thrust of what you want to say. And we are kind of leaving on a whimper here by just referring to a climate council document instead of giving our own clear recommendations here.
Would the group feel better to slim this down and talk about public engagement and consumer protections specifically, since those are the things that are recommendations, and not talk about context more than we have? Just getting a sense of what's sort of achievable. Yeah, Emily.
I wonder if what Pike's asking for is like a conclusion, like instead of leaving it on this that's different from our actual recommendations, the conclusion can be a summary and include like that list of recommendations. Like, I know we have the executive summary in the beginning, but I wonder if we can just have like a pretty short conclusion and something that like does wrap it up, that's different from this implementation recommendations. Because I feel like the implementation recommendations is not the conclusion and not the recommendations. It's a whole different thing, and having a small conclusion might separate that from those being interpreted as like, and finally, this is what we have.
Okay, so conclusion might do that, and just taking the temperature of the group, does that mean we get rid of the stuff about equity before and just say, like, use our rubric, or say nothing? Do we get rid of it? Again, just, I want to get us into as strong as a place possible for us to really get this done next time. So what's most doable?
I think we put in some nice work creating a very usable rubric, and I think we should recommend that the PUC use it, because to my knowledge to date, they have not.
I'm fine with keeping the equity aspects. I think that there are some recommendations on the each end of each of those that are more specific. I do think, like to Pike's point, we do need something that you're writing up, Mia, on like, here are the recommendations and some concluding thoughts. But I'm fine if the majority of folks want to delete that and make it more concise and just referring to the equity rubric.
Maybe to harp on it a little too much, but could anyone even explain what this sentence means? An equitable CHS outcome must take into context the most vulnerable communities in the state.
I believe that the contextual equity is like understanding who is in the state of Vermont, who the customers are, who will be impacted.
Yeah, I think this is
So
what you're saying
that's,
is not everyone gets the same amount. Those of low and moderate income receive more, or those in vulnerable communities receive more. Equitable is not an equal distribution of benefits to all Vermonters in this context. It's contextual equity. It's distributing, making sure those that have the least receive more.
Does that speak to what you were pointing out, or is there still are you still unclear?
Yeah, so if that was Matt who spoke, I think, saying the PUC should ensure that those who have least receive more is a lot clearer, a lot more direct than an equitable CHS outcome must take into context the most vulnerable communities in the state. I think the way Matt stated it was so much better.
So you're really looking for, what I've heard you say is, getting more to the point, having, you said less fluff, but really parsing through what it is we mean when we're saying that, when we're making the different statements. And I just want to check in with the rest of the group as well. Are we happy with Pike just taking the section and reworking it and coming back to us with a revised version before next week?
Yeah, I can do that. Saying that, I'm not sure I will be able to parse out what is meant behind a lot of these things, so I'll do my best with them. I would not have come up with the explanation that Matt did, for example. So I'll do my best, but yeah, no guarantees.
I'm gonna make a stab at it. I think more people working on this is better to have a steady supply of good language. I'm gonna make a stab at it. Definitely incorporate the suggestions about making clearer where our recommendations are in it. Throughout. I think we should both take a stab at it. Come ready with language, and I will sort of get the draft updated sort of as much as possible with the textual changes we have done in this meeting and sort of the things we've just earmarked now. And as soon as possible, in the next hopefully day or so, I will circulate another copy for the group to sort of do as a, here's where it is now, what changes do you want to make kind of thing. And then, we'll again start semi-fresh from next time. And Pike, I will take a look at your and Ben's like textual stuff, and I will try to sort of polish that up and identify typos where I can without, again, kind of overdoing it on the edits and touching anything that our group has already sort of approved as a group. So I'll do my best, and hopefully we'll just get to a place between our efforts at just reviewing this and making any changes.
With that, so let's start to wrap up. Is there anything else? So I'll open it up for public comment one more time, but before that, I want to check in with the EAG members to see if there's anything else you'd like to discuss, or any other work that you think that we should be doing between now and next week to put us in the best place possible. Okay, I'm hearing nothing, so I'm assuming that means everybody knows their roles. So I will go ahead and open it up for public comment if anyone has a last comment they'd like to make. Okay, I'm hearing no public comments. So if you'd like, Mia, I can go ahead and go over the action items for the group.
Sure, thanks.
Okay. So for action items, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear all the sirens going on. Okay, great. So we have one question for the EAG to return to, which is how the EAG should exist after 2025, once we have more clarity on Act 18. So I'm assuming that this wouldn't be a conversation for next meeting, which will be mostly focused on getting the report out the door. So maybe this is more of a question for January 7th. So all materials associated with the EAG and the draft rule will be submitted to the legislature, posted on the Clean Heat Standard website and the legislative report website. Dominic, is there any other place that I missed?
I think you got it.
Great. Mia is going to add into the executive summary the location of each of the recommendations sections, and add the implementation and add recommendations at the end in a more cohesive way. And that might be a table in the appendix that lists where to find the different recommendations. And that is it. Have I missed anything? Okay, and with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Mia.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ashira. Thanks everybody for joining again. I can't stress how much it's important that we keep our quorum for December 17th and January 7th. Certainly expect everybody to be there to vote on January 7th, but if we fail to meet quorum on the 17th, that's also a huge problem. So would really just encourage, I know it's a super busy time of the year for everybody, but just encourage everybody to be as available as possible to just get this over the finish line and hopefully reclaim some time back for our day jobs. So thanks for all your work on this so far. With that, I will call this meeting to a close, and I'll look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, the 17th. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mia.
Thanks, Mia.